Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel and another Energon universe discussion video. The Skybound continuity is rolling right along with the 4th issue of Transformers, and this is an interesting one. There's stuff in here that's paving the way for some adjustments to the status quo, as much of a status quo that there can be in 3 issues, but we'll get to that in a bit. Before we go into the current issue, I need to make a correction for my video covering issue number 3. It was pointed out to me in the comments that I missed one of the casualties in my body count total. This guy right here that got torn in half. Well, I'm not sure if this guy up here is the other half or another death altogether. I'm leaning towards him being someone else entirely, so the running body count total should be 10 instead of 9. I definitely messed that up, but I appreciate that it was brought to my attention so I could make the correction. Okay, now with that out of the way, let's move on. Issue 4 picks up pretty much right where issue 3 left off, with Optimus Prime rushing Sparkplug and the injured Spike to a hospital with Starscream in pursuit. This all culminates in what starts off as a fairly one-sided fight at the hospital between the Autobots and the Decepticons, with Rumble finally getting some page time, smacking Cliffjumper around with his signature pile drivers, while Soundwave gets the opportunity to drop the first half of his infamous catchphrase from the 1986 animated movie. The Decepticon advantage here is short-lived, however, as Ratchet arrives with reinforcements, marking the surprise first appearance of Jazz in the Skybound continuity. Although he was revived with just enough Energon to keep him functional for a short amount of time, which ends up being enough to turn the tide and drive the Decepticons off. But there's no cause for celebrations because the damage has been done. Prior to Jazz's arrival, Starscream attempted to destroy the hospital to torment Optimus Prime. Obviously, Jazz arrived in the nick of time to prevent that from happening, but Starscream's assault still knocked out all the electricity at the hospital, threatening Spike's survival as well as every other patient there dependent on life support. Ignoring Ratchet's protests, Optimus does what he's been trying to do since issue 1, which is to use the power of the Matrix to resolve the crisis of the day, in this case to restore power to the hospital and save the lives of the most vulnerable patients. Issue 4 closes with some eyebrow-raising turns, like Soundwave and Starscream tearing apart the still-living Skywarp in order to restore their ability to revive the fallen Decepticons, Ratchet replacing Optimus Prime's missing right arm with Megatron's severed arm, fusion cannon and all. Oh, and we get our first glimpse into Megatron's fate when the Ark crashed, so, you know, nothing too crazy, pretty boring stuff really, yawn-inducing even. I'm kidding, of course, these are all pretty surprising and noteworthy inclusions that I think will be the kind of things we'll point to when we're talking about the identity of this book and what makes it stand out among all the other Transformers comics out there, both now as the issues are coming out and in the future when the series has come to an end. And those things I mentioned are also the components that most feed into shaking up the status quo of the book so far that I mentioned at the start of the video. When Ratchet first brings up using Megatron's arm, Optimus is opposed to the idea, but that seems to change when Sparkplug suggests that he might have a solution for the Autobots' energy problem. And while we don't necessarily know exactly what Sparky's fix is, we can possibly infer that it has something to do with the conversion device that the Decepticons used in issue 2 to convert power from the plant into Energon, an action that Sparkplug was witness to. Now maybe I'm wrong and it's something else entirely, but considering the next time we see Optimus, he's sporting the arm and signature weapon of his nemesis, and talking about going on the offensive, I think it's safe to say that the book is building up to the Autobots making a push to retake the Ark. Personally, I would find that to be a welcome and satisfying change of pace, as the Autobots have been on the back foot since they were reactivated in the first issue. Seems like the only way to break out of these cycles of short, desperate skirmishes that we've seen so far would be for both factions to gain more steady footing and a bit more stability. As I was working on this video, the solicit for Transformers number 7 went up, and this cover image seems to point towards the Autobots reclaiming the Ark, along with Optimus apparently continuing to use Megatron's arm, as well as bringing Jazz back and having not only RC but Elita 1 make appearances. But who knows if that'll end up actually happening inside the pages of the issue, as Skybound has already demonstrated multiple times that we can't always trust the covers. Oh, hello, Wheeljack, character who does not appear in this issue despite being prominently featured on the cover. The Decepticons, for their part, attempt to gain more of an advantage by the end of this issue during the fairly gruesome moment where Skywarp is torn apart and used as raw materials to repair Teletran 1. Though it seems like there's a possibility he's still alive. He certainly was during the whole painful ordeal anyway, so I'm not counting him in the death tally just yet. This issue continues to embody the heroic Autobots versus evil Decepticons intent that Johnson's been putting into the series from issue 1, and the evil Decepticons half of the tagline is very much on display in this segment. What makes it more effective as an act of savage cruelty, I think, is how it subverts the interaction between Starscream and Skywarp at the start of this issue, where we see the de facto Decepticon leader take his fellow Seeker's hand to comfort his injured brother. And this being Starscream, it should have been obvious that any concern was just an act with nothing substantial behind it. But I really got the sense that Skywarp thought he was more valued and more important to Starscream and the Decepticons than he actually was. But almost be kind of sad if Skywarp wasn't such a sadistic, murderous dick, that is. The heroic Autobots aspect is also worth pointing out here. I think it was an interesting choice to have Optimus use the Matrix to bring the hospital's power supply back online. Typically, I feel like using the Matrix is reserved for epic, far-reaching existential threats, so it was cool to see it being used for a very specific street-level problem. And that helps reinforce this version of Optimus Prime in my mind as being one of the most heroic and self-sacrificing versions of the character that we've gotten. Not that I don't like the other interpretations that are out there, of course. Speaking of, it's kind of funny how Ratchet is the one that calls into question whether or not the humans are worth such an act of sacrifice in the Skybound continuity, whereas in the early days of the 2005 IDW run, he was the one that would do whatever it took to try and save lives, while Optimus Prime took a more detached outlook that was much more accepting towards loss of life. Those versions stand in stark contrast to their counterparts in the Skybound series. I wouldn't say one is better than the other. I'm just interested to see how different versions of the same characters vary across continuities. If you've been following my other videos on this series, then you know how highly I think of the art Daniel Warren Johnson has produced for Skybound's Transformers comics so far, and this issue is no exception. There are so many awesome pages, panels, and sequences throughout the issue, it's kind of hard to even know where to begin. There are the obvious jaw-droppers, the splash pages showing Optimus in his new arm, as well as the one showing Megatron stuck in the ice, that I would say are equally carried by the surprising narrative implications as well as the quality of the line art and color work. And there's the stylish sequence with Jazz, which stands as one of the most memorable surprises in the issue as far as I'm concerned. Johnson definitely draws a mean Jazz, and he certainly puts him to good use. From the moment that he arrives on the scene in his iconic alt mode, you know you're in for something special, and that's swiftly demonstrated as he transforms and goes toe-to-toe with Starscream and Soundwave. It's a hell of an entrance for the character, and it makes it that much more of a bummer when he runs out of Energon and drops out of the story. Sucks indeed, Jazz. Another highlight is Optimus opening the Matrix using just one hand. I don't fully understand the physics of it, but it's a cool image nonetheless, with the Matrix sort of hovering in midair while these nicely done bolts and arcs of blue energy lash out of the center of the artifact. Very cool. But if I had to pick a favorite image from the issue, it would be this one, with the Autobots peering into the hospital after their battle with the Decepticons. The weight and drama of the moment is heightened by the abundance of shadows and darkness. This panel is absolutely drowning in ink, and it's all the more gorgeous for it, making for a striking moment that tugs at the old heartstrings as Spike's dire outlook is presented to the reader. It's not all high drama, though. Sometimes it's the little things working together with the fantastic art that makes all the difference. For example, this section early on, where Cliffjumper and Carly come to Optimus Prime's rescue, this is a pretty cool moment, and I think it's made even better with Carly's line. And later on, as the Decepticons are retreating, Cliffjumper flips them the bird, which I thought was a nice touch. While we're on this panel, I thought this was an interesting little bit with Starscream grabbing something protruding out of Soundwave as he transforms. Could be nothing, but I'm wondering if it's a handle, as in maybe Johnson redesigned Soundwave's alt mode to be a boombox rather than the usual tape deck. Hard to say anything conclusive yet, as we haven't fully seen the character in his alt mode. But it wouldn't surprise me either way, as Johnson seems to be doing a mix of the original G1 alt modes mixed in with some redesigns, like Ratchet and Cliffjumper, for example, which we see the latter in his alt mode for the first time in this issue. I'm not a car guy, but whatever kind of car this is supposed to be doesn't seem to draw inspiration from the miniaturized Porsche alt mode from the G1 toy and cartoon, that I can see anyway. Like I said, not a car guy. Anyway, yeah, there was a lot to like about this issue, but I think I'm more excited about where we go from here, if that makes sense. Not that there isn't some great stuff here. There are a number of compelling character moments in Transformers number 4, with the conversation between Carly and Cliffjumper about loss being my personal highlight. But it's hard not to focus on Megatron and where that whole thread is going. Which, by the way, is it just me, or does it seem like this little red square bit on his abdomen is lit up while the others look more dim? Could be nothing. Could be a little visual thing to say I still function. I don't know. A little while back, I posted a video of a theory about Megatron appearing in the Cobra Commander series, and honestly, I'm prepared to be wrong about that one. I would expect and hope for Skybound to throw some curveballs, but I can't help but wonder if the sequence zooming into Megatron's icy confinement is setting up Cobra Commander number 1 in a similar fashion to how Transformers number 2 set up the first issue of Duke. It remains to be seen if the image of Megatron imprisoned in the ice is from the present day or a flashback, as flashbacks have been woven into this series seamlessly before. It's tempting, though, to point out that in the preview for the first issue of his series, Cobra Commander is in an icy environment that seems to be relatively remote. My original theory was that Cobra Commander was working with Megatron, but maybe he's on his way to recover Megatron. I don't know. It's possible. It's also possible that Megatron won't appear at all in the Cobra Commander series, and something else entirely will happen. Thankfully, we only have a short while to wait until the first issue of Cobra Commander is out, and whatever ends up happening, I'm looking forward to seeing where this is all going. But that's all from me for the moment. Be sure to like, subscribe, etc., and drop me a comment about your thoughts on this issue and some of the wild turns it took. Anybody else pumped to see Optimus with a fusion cannon? Be sure to check out my other videos on the Energon universe or my IDW coverage if you haven't already. Thank you for watching this video on Transformers number 4. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.